hear you. You can.
How's that, Chris?
Hey, Walt, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's good.
I'll shut the door.
Good. How do I get a hold of you, Mitch, if I run into some other issues? Yeah.
Can you call?
Yeah, give me your cell phone.
Yeah, I'll have to have it on the bag.
Yeah, just dial your cell phone there, and that's all I have to do is hit it. Trying to get those lights out of the picture there, Chris.
Oh, you're okay.
Okay. So I'll call you if I have any issue, and I won't say anything. I'll just dial it. Okay, thank you.
You're going to be good. You got this.
Oh, yeah. No, I just, Mitch is a lot more computer savvy. Well, I'm not at all. So
Join the club.
yeah, are you scanning people or are you casting for orthotics?
I still do casting.
For whatever reason, it's the same reason that the guy who details your car keeps it there all day because he wants you to think that he worked on it all day. But he was done with it. He was done with it at noon.
Why he charges more?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's good.
Just putting my orthotics together here.
Yeah. You know how to mute and unmute yourself, okay? There should be in the panel, it should show the mute and unmute button. And it's okay, as long as he's got a quiet background, it's
I do, yeah, I do.
yeah, it'll be fine. Because I can always do it for you, but you got a quiet background, you're gonna be fine.
I really do. I'm down in the basement, so we're in good shape.
Okay, sounds good.
In fact, somebody's coming down. I'm gonna see if Mitch can show me how to mute it. Reggie, show me how to mute this thing. Yeah. Say hi to Chris.
Hey, Chris, what's up, man?
Hey, Reg, how you doing?
Good. How you guys surviving the?
Doing okay. You know, numbers have obviously dropped, but we're doing our best.
Okay, so that's I just click on the microphone and mute.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. Our laser usage is starting to tick up and whatnot. So that's been a little bit of a bright.
Yeah, that's good.
Silver lining, if you will.
Yeah, no kidding. Good to hear.
I'll see what the future brings.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right.
Thanks, Reg.
Can I get you a beer or anything else?
Yeah, but I was just noticing, if you're ever on TV, you need powder for your head because it was really shiny.
Was it?
Yeah, really shiny.
Is there a special powder for that? How much you sell that for?
So I waited 35 minutes in line for my Starbucks. It's the second time I've been there. I was there at 6 this morning and I didn't have to wait. So we have 2 in town and 1 just closed. So everybody's racing over to the other one. So
Yeah, I could imagine. Wow.
my biggest aha moment is that laser. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
My wife broke her arm. She was just here. She just got out of her cast, and it's made a big difference. And nobody's more skeptical of those types of things than her. So she's very happy with it.
Yeah, that's good. You have a full-time person running that, right?
Mm-hmm. Which sometimes I use as leverage. It's like, guys, we've got a full-time person just for that. We've got to keep her going, and it forces us to be diligent in making sure that we're keeping her busy.
Yeah. Hey everyone, I got a question in the chat about so if you could all just phones first. Please mute your phones. After we will do Q&A towards the end, we can also use the chat. But for now, if you could just hit your mute button, I'd appreciate it. Walt, I'm going to mute you short for just a little bit too.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. We're on the hour right now. I'm going to wait probably just a few minutes because most of the time I do these, the largest percentage of people come on between the hour and like 5 after. So we'll just give it some time. Thanks for being on time. I do have you all muted at this point. I'll unmute when we get to the Q&A part a little bit later. I see that a couple people are putting something into the chat. We'll keep an eye on that. During the presentation, it'll be difficult for me to get to that, but when we get to the end, I'll have plenty of time to get to Q&A. So we'll run for probably an hour, maybe a little bit more. And by the way, if you have something to share, this is going to be kind of an open forum towards the end. You know, the idea here is to support each other. So if you have something you're doing in your practice that you think could benefit other people, we'd really appreciate that. Love to hear that because we're all going through this together. None of us are spared from this one. So the more we share, the better off we're going to all be getting through this and then on the other side of it as well. Just another couple of minutes here. We'll give people, I still see people are popping on. So hopefully they're finishing seeing patients and actually seeing patients or doing telehealth or whatever you're doing to be able to generate some revenue in your businesses. If you just got on the call, you're on mute. We're going to start very shortly. Thank you for joining us. Again, if you could all mute your phones. It sounds like somebody might not be muted. I'd really appreciate that. The less background noise, the better. I'm going to start in 1 minute. We just had 3 or 4 people just pop on the call. So Hey, Walt, give me a thumbs up that you can hear me okay. All right, excellent, good. Just want to make sure we're all good. Technology's working. I don't have a Reggie by my side, Walt, so. All right, everyone, I'm going to get started. This is Chris Milkie. And this week early in the week, I was thinking about, how we could all support each other and how this really is a scary time and unprecedented for all of us. I decided to put together a webinar, and I reached out to a couple of people to support me. Dr. David Zuckerman, who has a wonderful laser business. I asked him to send this information out to his list so that more podiatrists could have access to it, because the more the better. And again, we're here to support each other. So if you have something you'd like to share towards the end, we'll do a Q&A. That would be great. I asked Dr. Walt Ellis from St. Cloud, Minnesota to come on and share his orthotic protocol. I think you're going to be kind of blown away by that, and it's going to certainly be an opportunity for you to get better with orthotics as well now, as well as in the future. Because I always learn something from him, and we were at Shoal together many moons ago. So he's got an excellent presentation that I think you're all really going to benefit from. Because we all know it's about obviously great patient outcomes, but also driving revenue. And at this point, revenue is on the top of our minds. Where is it, and where is it going to come from? And when is this going to end, and when we're going to be able to get back to normal? And then what can we do better on the other side of this? So Dr. Zuckerman sent me a great little clip from the movie Gladiator, one of my favorite movies. And it was Maximus, who was getting ready to go to battle. If you haven't seen the movie, I highly, highly recommend it. And he said to the crew, he's got his big face mask on and all of that, if we stay together, we survive. And truly, that makes sense for what we're going through at this point. So again, we want to have you share something if you're doing something in your office that everyone else can benefit from. That's what this is all about. You go to podiatry meetings, and oftentimes you get a lot of naysayers and people who are competing with each other and all of that. I totally get it. The guys down the street, it might be a little bit different, but chances are most of us are in different parts of the country, and the more we can share, the better. And if someone down the street gets the information, good for them. So just covering the basics of, we all know what's happening now. We all know that being safe, and I'm sure you've all have communicated with your patients and your staff and everyone else about the safety measures that you're taking in your business. Obviously, very important. So that goes without saying. I think we're beyond that point. Whether you're putting it on your website, sending an email, sending direct mail, doing a social media post, however you're communicating with your patients and your community, obviously that's really important. Your physical and mental health are really critical during a time like this, always, but probably even more so now. And I think mental health more than anything else. Whatever you can do to get away from it all, read a book, go for a walk, spend time with your loved ones. Whatever that may be, it's really important to do that, because right now it's stressful, and we all know what the volume looks like, what the numbers look like, and it's so easy to have that kind of take over your life, lose sleep, all those things. You want to do whatever you can to get proper rest and try to stay away from too much alcohol. And this is a time when liquor stores and stores are still open, so it's so easy. I've had patients actually say that they're probably eating and drinking more now than ever. That's not good for us. We're business owners. We're not just employees in a business, and it's different for us because we lead our families, we lead our staffs, we lead ourselves. So staying healthy, both physically and mentally, really, really critical. And you are leading your team, so whatever you can do to do that. We have multiple doctors in our practice, and everyone plays a role. And whatever you can do, if you have yourself, great. If you have multiple doctors in your business, each one has a skill set. Each one thinks about things differently when you're going through crises like these. So having all hands on deck with something like this is really important. Everybody knows about government stimulus money, what that means to us. You can do your research. APMA has information on that. Your state has information on that. Obviously, you want to do whatever you can to get whatever you can and to make sure that you can pay your bills at the end of the day. Line of credit is another thing to be thinking about if you haven't. And then telehealth. Again, in our practice, we have a couple of doctors doing telehealth. I haven't yet. I've been able to see a decent number of patients. So however you're doing that in your business, it's an opportunity that we wouldn't have in normal circumstances because some states don't even have this. So fortunately, they have taken off the shackles on this and allowed us to do this so we can serve our patients in the best way possible. Drawing on past experiences. So, I'm going to share some of my experiences with all of this, and whether it's the right way or wrong way, that you can decide that. It's how I look at things like this. And, I think back to my career. I started in practice about 28 years ago. And, in some ways, certainly not to this level, likely, based on depending on how long this lasts. I feel like I've been through a couple of these to some extent. I first bought a practice back in 1991. I bought it for $115,000. And it was a CNC practice. And there were a few orthotics and a few things here and there. But I remember sitting at my kitchen table at night when my wife and my young son were sleeping and wondering how I was going to pay the bills. There was often more month left at the end and not enough money. So I'm thinking about that now. What's going to happen in the next couple of months when the volume now doesn't translate into dollars down the road. So there's things that I did at that point to put my practice in a position where I was much more comfortable. I could hire staff, I could market more, I could do more things. And those are things that I'm drawing on now. So maybe you've had a past experience, and maybe, you also, all of you probably are business owners, have been in the same position. If you bought a practice, whether you opened a practice cold, look back on that and draw on some of those experiences. And honestly, every day I think about something new that I did then. Last year in my business was a very difficult time. We had a terrible winter in Milwaukee. We lost 5 full days of business because of cold and snow. We lost a doctor was leaving our practice, so volume went down from that. And we went through a very, very difficult time. And it took a lot. It took a lot in many different aspects, especially marketing. And I'm going to get into that. You all know how much I love that. You know how important I believe that is to any small business. I'm drawing on those experiences now to help the practice move through the next month or two and then beyond that. Don't do this alone. It's so easy for us to just be silos. Most small business owners are just kind of doing their own thing. And, certainly there's family around, but nobody really thinks like us. Just being here is an opportunity to be tapped into a community. So there's resources out there. As I mentioned, I reached out to Dr. Zuckerman, and I reached out to Walt Ellis, and I'm communicating with the people that I know. And fortunately, there's a good community, people that are willing to help each other. I'd asked Dr. Ellis's practice where they're getting their cam walkers from because I want to reduce the cost of some of our supplies. And, within 2 minutes, I got a message back from his practice administrator on that. So don't do this alone. It's too difficult to do practice just in general alone. Having some sort of community board of directors, so to speak, around you is really helpful. And, if you haven't been doing something like that, there certainly are opportunities to do that. Trying to run a small business by yourself in the healthcare business now is really, really challenging. So this is an opportunity for you to tap in and then stay tapped in, because there's just so many great things you can get from other people. And I don't know it all. I'm never going to. And being able to tap into other people's capabilities is what helps me in my business and, in our practice. Don't discount. I've seen some things about how people are offering, lasers, for instance, whether it's toenail laser or pain laser or whatever you're using your laser for, packages and things like that. Personally, I just don't think that way. Patients are not coming into the office because they want to stay safe. The ones that obviously aren't coming in, that are canceling their appointment, postponing their appointment, it's for a reason. I think you're going to cheapen your brand. Again, this is my opinion. I think you're going to cheapen your brand by doing that. And if you discount in general, then fine. And we offer $25 off the initial exam on our website. We'll continue to do that, but it's not turning into $50 off now. And we're not going to make offers about lasers and different things that we're doing and drop our orthotic fees and things like that. You know, the question is, what kind of patients do you want to attract? And people that come in because of discounts, typically they're always thinking about discounts. So, we really stay away from that. And during a time like this, I think it's going to cheapen your brand. And again, if you're going to discount in general, then do so. But if you're going to do it just because of this, just because you want some revenue, I think you're looking short-sighted and not really thinking about the long game. You have an opportunity to strengthen your brand, and the way to do that is communicate. And I'll talk about that when it comes to content. But this is a way for you to strengthen your brand with whether you're doing social media or communicating with your patients through emails or direct mail. But if you do things like offer discounts and try to woo people into your office with different specials and things like that, I'm not so sure there's going to be more strength to you. I think there's going to be some weakness long-term for your practice. So use this as an opportunity to strengthen your brand. This is one of the things I always think about, again, because I've been through this before to some degree. And again, I know this is unprecedented, so it may be different and it might be worse. But I'm thinking about the future. Like, I think in terms of, yes, this is scary, but it's also exciting in some ways. Because there's kind of a blank slate to some extent in terms of what you want to create for your business. So I kind of like having a whiteboard and being able to kind of map out what I really want to have happen on the other side of this. Certainly I'm doing whatever I can to focus on today and tomorrow and next week. But at the same time, I'm thinking about the future and what's possible for me, my practice, our practice, for the future of the business. So I'm a big believer in vision, and this is an opportunity to really tap into your vision. People think that's such a soft thing, like, oh, well, you're talking about my vision. Tell me more about tactics. So I can tell you one thing, a tactic is to have a vision and know exactly what you want to accomplish now during this, as well as on the other side of this. So the more that you can get creative and think about the future and what you want to create. I just got off a call with a podiatrist who was just like so incredibly excited. You would never know in this conversation with her that we were going through this COVID-19. I mean, she is like so excited for her practice in the future. She knows her numbers better. She was at the FABI event, which I know a number of you were at back a couple of weeks ago, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I mean, she's got this list that she's going through. She's putting a stronger foundation into her business. And I mean, she's super excited. So she knows what she wants to create, and she's taken the time now to put that together. She's actually shut down her practice for a couple of weeks and is really just working on the infrastructure of the business, which, if you're going to do something, that's a great place to do that. As you think about what you want to create, I love this. This was from Dan Sullivan, who runs a company called Strategic Coach. He's one of the two Dans that I talk about a lot, that I've learned a lot from. I listen and read both of their materials on a very consistent basis. So Dan Sullivan talked about the 4 freedoms as business owners, and you can call us entrepreneurs if you want to. I think we're different than entrepreneurs. We're really more business owners. We have 4 freedoms, and this is what you can think about in terms of creating your future. Time, right? Like, what do you want your schedule to look like? Are you happy with your schedule? Do you want to change something about it? Because now's the time to do it. You've got the time to think about it, and you can think about what you want it to look like on the other side. So if you don't like your schedule, if you don't like how many days you're working, this is something that you have the freedom to change at this point, because you're not an employee, you own the place. Money, what do you want to generate? What do you want to create? What does your number look like at the end of the year? Yes, we're going to go through a couple of months that are challenging, but maybe on the other side of that, there's going to be 100 days or more of prosperity. And that's how I think about it. I don't like to get too much into the weeds of what's happening today. I'm thinking about the future. But obviously we have to focus on being able to get through this time. But what does money look like to you down the road? Relationships, right? Like, who's around you from a staff standpoint that maybe you don't want around you, and you can make changes. This is the time to do it. And, this is where you really put your vision together. And if you don't feel like you have a high performing team, then this is the opportunity to make a change with that. And then purpose. When I think about purpose in a practice, it's what kind of pathologies are you seeing? Are you seeing the kind of things that you want to, or are you spending too much time doing things that you don't like doing? And this is an opportunity to make a change in that regard. I know it's going to be really easy to just take all comers, once the go sign is given, but the question is that what you want long term? And, certainly I believe in servicing the patients that want to come into your practice, but I also know that if you're doing too much of one thing, and especially if it's something like CNC, which, many of us don't like doing too much of, what can you do in your business? How can you change your schedule? How can you change that? How can you market differently to bring the kind of patients into your business that you do want to see? And an attitude of gratitude. When things are tough, this is one of the things I go to, and I can't say that I'm really great with this around the people in my office and necessarily even with myself, but for some reason, when times are tougher, I tend to sit down and then put a list together, the things that I'm grateful for and the people that I'm grateful for. And there's something that magically happens with that. It changes my mindset. It puts me into a happier state. And again, it sounds a little woo-woo, but at the same time, if you read a lot of the experts, they talk about how important gratitude is. It's good for your soul. It's good for your immune system. It's good for a lot of things. So don't discount that. And, gratitude can be, with the people around you, with your staff, communicating with your patients through an email. I just did a short video that I'm going to be sending out to our patients this weekend about how much I appreciate the fact that they're willing to come into the office. They're thanking me for being there. I'm thanking them for showing up. I really appreciate that. So the more you can communicate authentic gratitude, the better you're going to feel about it. And certainly the better other people around you are going to feel about that. This could be your if I could just moment. And I think about this a lot. If I could just what? Like we all wake up in the morning and we think about if I could just, it's kind of those 4 freedoms. If I could just, get rid of that person in my office, or if I can just, not see as many routine foot care patients, if I can just do a number of things, if I could just, market for, more plantar fasciitis patients. We all have our if I could just, and this truly is a time for you to tap into your if I could just moment. So I'm always thinking about these things. And again, these are mine. You may have different ones. If I could just raise my fees, and I'm already, have a plan to raise fees. It has nothing to do with trying to gouge people and, be unethical about trying to get more on the other end of this. This is something I've been thinking about a lot. And those of you that, have heard me on stage or elsewhere talk about fees, I firmly believe in kind of pushing the envelope. I don't believe in being greedy and gouging, but at the same time, I think we undervalue what we do. And there's some of us on the call. I know Dr. Walt Ellis on the call here. He pushes the envelope on fees, and oftentimes, we'll talk a little bit about fees, and it'll be like, wow, you're definitely beyond me. And he's in a smaller town, you can push the envelope on fees. So that's what I think about. That's one of my if I could just do more with less. We unfortunately had to downsize a number of people in our office this week because, truly we're planning. The volume this week was much lower than the week before. So, who knows what's going to happen in the month of April. I think it's going to be fairly similar. So we have to plan. And, we're trying to do as much as we can with fewer. And we often find that, when someone leaves the practice or we end up having to terminate somebody, we can still get the job done. And we're going to see how we can do it through this whole crisis with a smaller number. So that might be something you're thinking about. Significantly reduce the nail business. I mean, we have a fairly robust nail business, and, this might be an opportunity to do less of that and really be able to track the better patients. Combine ESWT with amnio, something we've already done a little bit of in our practice, but as I talk to other people that have done this a lot more, this is something that I'm certainly thinking about doing more with. I know that it's more successful doing both of these together than doing them individually. So, just another way to provide better care for patients and also know that we can drive more revenue with something like that. Increase my Remy laser business. So this is the laser that I use for pain. I've used it for warts. I'm going to start using it for toenail fungus and do more of that. I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm a big proponent of having a laser for pain. I know many of you have probably had a laser for toenail fungus that's been around a lot longer. Pain lasers now are becoming a lot more commonplace, accepted by the medical community. You know, Harvard did a study on how successful they are. If you were on earlier, you heard Walt talk about his laser, phenomenal results with the laser. He's had one longer than I have, but you know, absolutely love having that. It's a cash thing, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then write a plantar fasciitis book for niche marketing, just something that I've been thinking about for a while. I'm a big proponent of content and niche marketing and things like that. So, you know, take the time to work on your business now that you have the time, and really think about your if I could just things that you have in your business. And 3 to 5 to 7 or 10 of those, whatever the number is, this is a golden opportunity to do that. You know, cash confidence. We all know how important cash is right now for our businesses. This is one of the cash revenue streams in our business that we just brought in about 6 months ago. I'm just fascinated by the results that come out of this. It doesn't work for everything. And again, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Zuckerman, who gave me an opportunity to send the information for this webinar to his list of patients. I purchased a laser from him. You can go to remylaser.com. There's others on the market. I love this one because it works, because it's small, it's portable. You can transfer it from office to office. We haven't done that yet. We haven't needed to. It works on more than just pain. The price point is very low. It's under $18,000. I don't want to exactly give the price. I'll let him take care of that if you decide to do that. But not to just talk about this one piece of technology, but you know, we have ESWT in our office. We have regenerative medicine in our office. I'm going to have Walt talk about orthotics in the practice. These are all cash things. And by the way, it's a wonderful thing to see, you know, $397 cash for, you know, something like this, and all paid at one time, because we all know that, you know, now money is really important to our businesses. So wherever you can get your cash confidence from, I'd highly recommend doing that. And I'm a big believer in businesses that provide excellent customer service, and I've got nothing but that from Dr. Zuckerman and his laser technology company. So that's for you if you decide. Cash is king, you know, orthotics. I'm going to let Walt talk more about that. Billing, these are the things we're thinking about. Our charges right up to date. You know, there's less volume, so there should be no questions that charges are not up to date in your business. Accounts receivable, you know, there's a better opportunity now for your billing department to be focusing on getting the money into your business that needs to come in. You know, you're over 90 and being able to do whatever you can. It might be a little bit more challenging to get it from patients and insurances now. I have no idea if insurances are going to, you know, pay slower or, you know, just wait for a long time to pay because, you know, they're going through this as well. But whatever we can control, we will. And, you know, going after as much AR as possible would be important for cash. Inventory, right? Like not having somebody order supplies that you don't know about and you have plenty of them in the office. You know, we had this happen once where someone who was terminated from our business just before she left, she had ordered a whole bunch of supplies and she wasn't, you know, one of the, you know, it wasn't her duty to do that. And we got left with a $1,700 bill. You know, that's the last thing you want right now. So making sure that you use all your inventory, because inventory is cash. It's money sitting on your shelves. Payroll, of course, we talked about whatever you have to do with that to make sure that your practice can survive. And then suppliers, I mentioned we're cutting our CamWalker fee and, you know, the cost to us, cutting whatever cost you can in that regard. You know, one of our partners in the business mentioned, you know, not having Aramark come for towels, you know, things like that, where when there's opportunities to cut costs, look at every expense in your business. You know, this is where you can really get super granular with your business and look at where all the expenses are in your business and look at places to cut or, you know, stop or do something, cut completely. And then just being honest with vendors. You know, if you're going to, you know, pay them 60 days rather than 30 days, the more upfront you can be about that, the better your relationships can be with long-term. And again, it's so easy for us to think short term with a lot of these things, but we really do want to think long term about our businesses. So there's now time for implementation. And many of you were at the FABI event just a couple of weeks ago, and you probably have a notebook full of information. And maybe you were at another event or listened to a webinar or something in the recent past. Now is the opportunity to implement, because it's so easy to have the excuse that I went back to my practice and I got too busy and I just didn't have the time. You have the time now. So this is where you can put those protocols into place for whatever, whether it's on the clinical side of the business or the front desk side of the business or the billing department. Wherever you can put protocols together, take the time to do that. And maybe task someone in your business who's not as busy. The phone isn't ringing as much. The medical assistants aren't as busy. But this is the opportunity. There's no excuses now not to have things like this done. Training, right? You can train better phone training, better medical assistant training, maybe better billing training, maybe training yourself to do some things in the business, like being able to schedule an appointment or do things that you wouldn't normally do, how to take x-rays, things like that. But if you're not going to do those things, at least having your staff get trained better, because training is something that should never take a back seat. Your dashboard, many of you have talked about, putting a scoreboard or a dashboard together for your business. This is a great opportunity to do that. And I've often been asked the question of like, what should I put on my dashboard? There's really no easy answer to that. It's whatever you want, whatever numbers you think are important to your business. Whether it's looking at the top 5 to 10 procedures that you do in your business and just tracking them on a consistent basis, whether it's new patients and what sources those patients are from and comparing that to previous months. So your dashboard can be big and fancy, or it can be 10 simple things that are numbers that you're going to look at and then make decisions on, not just numbers that you're going to put on there and then put it off to the side and not do anything with. Practice math is a biggie, really understanding your numbers now more than ever. I think practice math is important always, but this is certainly a time to really know, and you can kind of make some projections based on, maybe this past week and how many patients you think are to come in and what's the PPV for those patients and what are your projections going forward, so that, you can have conversations with your accountant, with your banker, for a line of credit, or if it comes down to, having to tap into the whole federal stimulus, you'll have a better understanding of that. But again, don't just think short term and then put it to the side. Understanding your practice math consistently is something that's only going to help you long term. Marketing, of course, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Marketing is probably the one thing that I've always spent the most time on during the 2 episodes that I mentioned in my experience, and certainly something now that I'm thinking a ton about. And again, it's not from a sales perspective, it's from a value perspective. And I call it serve first marketing. And this is something that I think about always when it comes with marketing. It's not sales marketing, it's serve first marketing. How can I give value to people? And the more value you give now, the more it's going to benefit you short term and especially long term. So if you haven't done a lot of marketing, this is an opportunity to learn as much as you can about marketing, and just get started. Implementation is really the key, because I know, and I've been guilty of this in the past, many people who get all sorts of marketing information, they hear it at a conference, they listen to a podcast, they read a book, they get something on the internet, and then they do nothing with it. And it's because either they just don't take the time to do it, they don't think it's that important, they don't know where to start, but this is the opportunity to do that. So value versus sales. Again, the more value you give people at this point, the better. What do I mean by that? Value is providing them with information that's going to benefit them, right? If you're looking for sales, especially at a time like this, you're going to cheapen your brand and it's going to fall on deaf ears, because if they're not coming, they're not coming. Okay. So give them as much value as possible. Give them content. You know the content. You know what works for plantar fasciitis. You know what to look for with an ingrown toenail. You know why people have lateral ankle instability. You know all these things. You don't need to be a writer to do this. I didn't know anything about writing when I started to write content. I just started writing from my experiences. So that's what I do when I give value and give content to people. And there's many different mediums to do it. Email content is absolutely one of the most powerful things. Being able to click a button and send patients an email during a time like this is absolutely golden. And we've sent a number of emails, again, content emails or emails about safety, what we're doing in our practice, how we're keeping our patients safe, how we're getting them into the treatment rooms quickly. I know a doctor who had a great, Dr. Hurst down in Austin, Texas, when we were at FAB, he was talking about how he's going to text his patients while they're in their car to let them know that a treatment room is ready and they can come into the office. I mean, that's just awesome. Wayne is really a smart businessman, and, just being able to keep those treatment rooms open and having it be a safe environment for your patients. But, having an email list and a database to be able to do that is absolutely incredible. So we send a number of emails. We have an automated system for that, and a number of you are on that automated system. Your patients are getting an email every single week. We send 2 or 3 to our patients. We can send videos to our patients through email. So if you don't have email set up in your practice, wow, this is an opportunity to do that, because it's going to help you, for the long term. But we all know that another crisis is coming at some point if we're going to be around for a while. So just being prepared for that will help you. Direct mail content. So this is something that I spend a lot more time on when times are tough. And at the end of this, I'll actually give you a couple of the direct mail pieces that we're sending to our patients. One is about laser, if you have a pain laser in your business, and one is about ESWT or shockwave that you can use in your business. And literally, you print off a list of patients that you want to send it to. What we do is we really focus on the kinds of pathology we always like to see. So ESWT, of course, plantar fasciitis, and laser can be for a number of different conditions. But we really focus in on the patients we want to see, typically the 40 to 60-year-old females, the insurances we want to see. We pick our top 2 or 3 and just pick a number, like 250 is a number I like to do. And we just print off a list of them, put labels on there, engage our staff in the whole process, because fulfillment of this is obviously important. We want to get it out the door, and they're happy to do it. They have time to do it, and we're getting it into the hands of our patient. I had a patient come into the office yesterday who said she was there because she got a letter from us 6 months ago, and she's in for something that's going to generate decent revenue. So she paid for that mailing and then some, just with that. And she was one of a number of people. So again, think long-term about this. You're putting the positive escrow. It's like a positive escrow for you. You're putting this into your goodwill bank account, so to speak, with patients. They'll really appreciate that, and it's going to pay off for you. There's never a time that a direct mail piece doesn't work. And guess what? People are home, and they're probably deleting a ton of their emails because they're getting so many of them now, and it gets to the point where it gets too much and it gets boring, but they're not getting as much direct mail. So I say compete with their mailbox, not with their email inbox. Smile and dial, another thing we do in our business, calling patients. We just did this recently. I had 15 patients on my list that I wanted to call. They were plantar fasciitis patients, and 3 of them came back into the practice. 2 because they had plantar fasciitis again, and 1 because she had a different condition. But because we picked up the phone and we put this in the hands of staff who had the time to do it, we were able to bring more patients into the business. Laser focus on your top 20%. So that's what we do in terms of marketing. In tough times, we want to really reach out to that top 20%, because the 80-20 rule pretty much works for every business. If you look at your numbers closely, probably the top 20% of your business, your 80% of your business is coming from the top 20% of your patients. So why not focus there? Small businesses, I'm not going to go into that much, but We use this for, we have a podcast that we're doing it for, and just doing a little bit of social media with that. And then social media content, a perfect way to reach out to your patients during a time like this, let them know you're open, maybe give them some valuable content of, conditions and things like that. That's a great medium for that type of thing. The first 100 days, now thinking about the future. So are your phones going to be ready? Do you have enough people on the phones to take care of that? Do you have enough team in the office? Do you have enough inventory? Are you doing value-based scheduling? I think this one is really important. I call it that because we have a main column and an overbook column, and our main column is where we want our higher valued patients. I kind of call it, I heard this from somebody else who coaches dentists, the money column. I don't like to use that term. It's really the main column. So, but that column's really, really gold to us. And as you look to the future in the first 100 days after we get the go sign, hopefully you're going to be really busy. Your phones are going to ring a lot. You've got resources there, and you're going to be able to get the best patients on your schedule so you can drive the revenue again. So really think about that. And if you want to change your schedule during this time, change your schedule. And then, of course, we talked about marketing. What are you going to do now? And then what are you going to continue to do so that you can dig your well before you're thirsty? And with that, perfect time for me to take a sip of water here. I'd like to introduce and bring on Dr. Walt Ellis. I'm going to unmute you here in a second. You are unmuted. So just real quickly, Dr. Ellis has been practicing in St. Cloud, Minnesota for, I'm guessing, close to 30 years now. Is that about 30 years, Walt?
Yes, 30 years, yes.
Yeah. So Walt opened a business 30 years ago in St. Cloud, Minnesota. He has an excellent practice. There's 4 doctors. He's got one big location. They do a little bit of outreach. I've been in his office. I've seen the way it operates. I've seen the number of patients that come through. He's going to talk about orthotics. He's got a really great orthotic system in his practice, and I think he's going to give you a tremendous amount of value that you can use now in the future. So with that, Walt, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. Again, my name is Walt Ellis, and I've been here in St. Cloud, Minnesota for almost 30 years. I came to this community as one of the first podiatrists in the area. Minnesota is a tough place to practice. I think we're top 2 or 3 for the poorest reimbursement. I would say for the most part, we've got a very, very conservative group of patients. So they're going to pick up a dime and look at it at both ends of it, or both sides. The reality is, as far as being an orthotic guru, I certainly don't think of myself that way. I think of myself as being quite low tech. In fact, just getting my picture on the screen was something I needed a lot of help with. And that goes for my knowledge of biomechanics. I mean, I know the basics of biomechanics. I know when we came out of school, we were indoctrinated with all sorts of angles and dangles and, the different degrees of rear foot and forefoot posting and so forth. I think one of the things that helped me the most was a friendship that I made with a gentleman, a physician by the name of Sheldon Langer. Sheldon founded Langer Biomechanical many years ago. And the reality is what I learned from Sheldon was not the intricacies of biomechanics, but just the opposite. Sheldon would routinely say, "Well, don't overthink this. The reality is most of your colleagues are going to have me build an orthotic that is technically and theoretically the correct device for the patient that they'll never use." And what he really tried to stress was the fact that you don't have to be over the top with your device. A simple sulcus length orthotic with a 2 to 4 degree rear foot post with a good top cover. At the time we were using Naugahyde. I've since discovered EVA, and I'll talk about some of the benefits of that over the Naugahyde. But the reality is I think, providing patients with a very basic orthotic. I like sulcus length because I don't have to cut back a full length 4-foot extension. I like to be able to dispense an orthotic for what it is. I don't want to have to trim it if I don't have to. I want to make sure that it fits in the shoe right off the bat. In fact, if I get somebody a second set of devices a year later, we'll oftentimes photocopy that old device and send that profile along just to make it that much easier. For the most part, many of our patients have orthotics, yet we're not, quote unquote, a biomechanical practice. We do a lot of surgery. We do a lot of nails. We see a lot of diabetics. The reality is don't get caught up in the fact that if you do a lot of surgery, that you don't have an orthotic to offer your patient. The reality is you do. Just about every patient we see, bunions, hammer toes, neuromas, we cast for an orthotic ahead of time. I'd rather catch the height of that arch, the width of that heel, before they have 6 months worth of edema. We tend to follow all our patients with an orthotic postoperatively. I mean, and it works well. And when patients indicate and wonder why we're doing it ahead of time, it's a simple explanation. We explain the swelling and so forth that will develop within the arch and so forth postoperatively. I'd much capture the height of their arch and the width of their heel and the position of their rear and forefoot now than after a surgery. Most surgeries I do a lot of forefoot surgery, some rear foot surgery. Most surgery I do will not change that orthotic prescription. So don't get caught up in the fact that I live in a, people say, well, I live in a community. People are really conservative. It's a farming community or it's a high medical assistance community. I mean, I have all of that. One thing that Chris has done very well in teaching his followers, his students, is that don't prejudge people. I used to do that. Be surprised how many people will pay outright who have much less than you do. People on medical assistance, people who run a very conservative business. I mean, as soon as you prejudge that person, you've already determined in your mind that they're not going to buy from you. They're not going to accept your prescription. And I've made that mistake for years, and I've completely changed that. You also have to be very comfortable prescribing an orthotic. Orthotic can be a pain in the butt, as we all know. There's adjustments, there's things that need to be done. People are not happy. I started prescribing orthotics much more successfully when I followed Shelley Langer's advice is, Walt, if you have adjusted that device appropriately, you've done everything you can for that patient, they're still not happy with, give them their money back, And once I thought in those terms, now I didn't tell the patient ahead of time before we casted them or anything like that. But because as soon as you tell that patient you're going to give them their money back, they're going to quit. They're not going to break the device and they're not going to use it appropriately. But if you really get to a point where the patient, you just know it's not going to work for them, or that they're not going to work with you, give them a refund. It costs you nothing to do so. And I'll talk a little bit about the arrangements that I have with my orthotic company when it comes to those types of things. If I can prescribe the number of orthotics that we prescribe here in central Minnesota, most of you are in such a better position than we are right here. We do anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 pair of orthotics a year. That's a lot. That's a hell of a lot. We didn't always do that, but we always didn't have 4 practitioners. I can tell you, everybody here is very good at promoting an orthotic. Over the last 30 years, we've probably done anywhere from, $13 to $18 million worth of orthotics. Just this, and we're not a, quote unquote biomechanical practice. We're a very straightforward podiatry practice. We see all sorts of people, the whole gambit. But orthotics are a big part of what we do. Think of the orthotic as not only providing a great service to your patient, be able to put yourself out on a limb a little bit and try the orthotic for the sinus tarsi, or for the patient who can't have bunion surgery, or for the metatarsalgia or whatnot. There's very few things that I don't try an orthotic first. It's low tech, it's inexpensive compared to a lot of the other things. When you explain to patients that, let's try this, let's try to avoid a surgery, and let's go ahead and try this, they're much more open to it. Cost, we charge $497 for orthotics all day long. If you want a second set, we're going to charge you $497. Now, that's unlike a lot of practices where they'll discount. I think for some practices, discounting that second set of orthotics is fine. We tend not to do that because we want you to get used to that first device. We don't want you mixing and matching orthotics, but down the road, we'll cut you a deal or something if you ask about it. But so many people just say, I want another set. And it's nice not to have to get into the discussion that, oh yeah, well, they've already told you they want another set. They haven't asked about price. So we really don't have a less expensive orthotic. We tend to do that on a per case basis, but in most cases, people are paying full boat for the second set. Why? Because a lot of our patients are getting that second set of orthotics with their health savings account. And, why would we discount that? It's just something that we haven't had to do at this point.
Hey, Walt, I have a really quick question for you. Do you, how do you do that with the second set? Do the doctors offer that? Does the staff offer that? How does that happen?
Yeah. We talked about Wayne and how Wayne does this down in Austin, Texas. He does it completely different than we do. We tend to put our focus on making that first orthotic work well, okay? And down the road, 3-4 months down the road, if we're still seeing you, if they don't bring it up, we'll bring it up. And we'll, if you're interested in another set of orthotics, we'll do so. Always be in the habit of reminding patients and asking if they have an HSA account. Be surprised how many people have it, don't use it to its fullest extent, or they forget about it. It's just how many times do I go into a restaurant and I have the gift card in my pocket for that restaurant and I forget to use it? I mean, it happens to me all the time. And an HSA account is the same way. Whether you're promoting laser, which we have EPAT, whether we're promoting that or whether we're promoting an orthotic. These HSA accounts are very powerful, but you got to remind people that they may have one. And be surprised how many people don't even know that they have one, and they'll call us back and say, yeah, Dr. Ellis asked me to check on this, and I guess I do have that. I didn't know what it was called. So look at that as something to shoot for. Did that answer your question, Chris? Was that?
Yep, absolutely. That's good.
Again, our orthotic is very straightforward. EVA top cover or a Naugahyde top cover. I always add a first MPJ cutout unless the patient has a cavus foot architecture. Shelley Langer was the one 30 years ago that said when he broke away from Langer Biomechanics and formed Benefoot, I was his first customer. And he said, Walt, I'd like to do something a little bit different. I'm going to just automatically put a first MPJ cutout in every cast you send me, unless you tell me otherwise, or unless we identify that cast as being a pes cavus foot architecture. And I cannot tell you how powerful that was for our practice, especially in treating plantar fasciitis or heel spur syndrome. Add a first MPJ cutout to every device you have, and you'll see better results faster, even on patients who you don't particularly identify as having hallux limitus. This was an observation that Dr. Langer made years ago, and it's been probably one of the more powerful tidbits that I've received from a practitioner since I've been in practice. As far as working with your lab, we pay no more than $90 to $100 for an orthotic. I like to stay right around that $87 to $90 range. And one of the things that you can negotiate with your lab is have them cover the shipping. I don't pay for shipping on a lot of things. Whenever I'm negotiating, whether it's a cam walker or whatnot, shipping is something that companies are willing to negotiate with. Oftentimes they won't budge on their core costs for their orthotic. Why? A lot of these orthotic companies have they have contracts with the federal government. They can't charge you less than the $87 they're charging you because that's what they charge the VA. But they can negotiate on shipping and things of that nature. So that's something they can make a decision on without interfering with any of their other contracts. So free shipping is really important. I like sulcus versus full length for the simple reason patients can easily transfer them from shoe to shoe. And if they're on the fence about getting a second pair, maybe you suggest they get a full length for their basketball shoes, okay? But again, I don't want to trim orthotics. I want to be able to hand them out. I want to be able to fit them in the shoe, but I hate getting my scissors out and making changes. Try to eliminate a lot of that if you can. I like EVA now versus Naugahyde just due to the fact that very rarely am I re-gluing any EVA where I was re-gluing Naugahyde on a pretty regular basis. You're talking about kind of a tough time, obviously, but I can tell you that a lot of the simple things that we've done for patients since our state has been put on somewhat of a lockdown, but we're allowed to stay open, we've been replacing orthotics. I mean, it's amazing. People see our sign, they see that we're still open. We have a black sign out front on wheels that we just wheeled in. We rent it for $179 a month. It says we're open. Please come in and visit us. Curbside, this is a Wayne Hurst thing, curbside waiting. So we'll text them when our room is ready for them. And that's been a big boon to the business. So we've gone from seeing, 80 to 90 patients a day to seeing, I just cut off here, Chris. Are you still seeing me, Chris?
Oh yeah, you're still here. You're good.
I can't see you, but I'm going to just keep talking.
You're
So
good.
in any case, we're having people come in and look at an orthotic as being an annuity. The reality is that annuity is something that they routinely come in for. Now, a big pearl is this, is have your lab, whether they scratch it into the bottom or they put a label on. I'm going to hold up an orthotic here, Chris. You'll have to tell me whether it's showing up, but you can see there's a name of a patient.
Just put it a little bit higher,
How's that? Is that, how's that?
a little lower.
Okay.
Perfect right there. That's good.
Good. Okay.
And you have an expiration date on there.
Yeah, so what I do is I make sure that our phone number is on our orthotic. I have an expiration date of 3 years, which is just not arbitrary, but after about 3 years, most orthotics either are worn out or the patient's prescription has changed slightly. So it's food for thought. There's plenty of people who come in after 3 years that we don't necessarily change their orthotic if it's in good shape, but it's that ticker out there that tells them, hey, I need to get in and have this evaluated. So we have the date it was produced, the expiration date, my name, and most importantly, my phone number. They can literally dial as they're looking to the bottom of their orthotic and set something up. I think that's really important. We use pre-printed orthotic forms, which means that I do very little checking, okay? I don't reinvent the wheel with every patient that I see because so many of our orthotics are very much the same. For instance, now I will check first MPJ cutout because we see a lot of pediatric and we see a lot of Cavus feet. So I don't pre-print first MPJ cutout, but the EVA top cover is, sulcus length is, and if I have to change that, it's easier and less often that I have to cross something out and add it. We use we check poly or co-poly, but everything else should be set up. So we insist that our orthotic company sends us pre-printed forms, okay? And if you're not fully computerized, I would have, if you're still using a chart, have them send you copies. In other words, it's a 2-page orthotic form where one goes in the chart and one goes to the lab, so you don't have to run your copy machine. Okay. Otherwise, now everything that we've done is on the computer. I don't have any of those worries anymore. But just something to think about if you're not all computerized and all fully EMR. We already talked about photocopy or profiling the orthotic. I think that's important. It just allows the lab to cut that device, especially if you're doing full length. That's the best time to do a photocopy, real size picture of one of the orthotics. Go diagonally on your copy machine, send it out, and make sure that your lab cuts it to that size so you're not screwing around with a scissors in the room trying to get this thing to fit. I like to use plaster. I think it for whatever reason, maybe just because I'm old fashioned and it works, but I get a much better device through plaster casting than my competitors get with scanning. Now, if all my competitors in the area were using plaster, I'd probably start looking at scanning and try to make that work, but that's not the case. So I'm going to stick with the casting at this point. It works very well. And again, we're not paying for the shipping, but our promise to our orthotic lab is that we will try to combine as many casts in one box as possible. So we don't take advantage of that. And as a result, they don't question why they should continue to give us that extra perk as far as covering our shipping and so forth for us. We make them supply the boxes, the labels. I try to make it as easy for my staff as possible. We have plaster traps in all of our rooms. So even though we designate 2 rooms for casting, I've got 10 rooms here. We designate 2 for casting. We've got plaster traps in every room. So if the 2 casting rooms are full, we'll just cast you right in the room that you're in. And that's ideal. What's interesting is we've got a big group in town that casts everybody in the prone position, and anybody who's overweight or has a back issue or whatnot hates that. They absolutely hate being casted in the prone position. And it's the one thing that they remember about their experience of getting casted for orthotics is the prone position. We do everything sitting up in the supine position, and you can cast just about everybody in that position. For patients who can't be casted or for mentally challenged or whatnot, we keep a few foam boxes and so forth. I use Marathon Labs in the Twin Cities. I think they're okay. They produce a good device. I have some issues with them and cost, but generally they produce a very good device. I also use Bergman Labs for our accommodated device. That old world craftsmanship, they send me these things. They look like baseball gloves. They're so well put together. They're leather on both sides. That's what I tend to use for my accommodative device. Just finishing up here, we tend to see our patients 3 to 4 weeks. It's really important in your negotiation with your orthotic lab that if they say your device is going to be there in 3 weeks, that it's there in 3 weeks. So you don't have to call patients and reschedule them. And there has to be some consequence. If they can't get it there, then there has to be some, there has to be a deal, okay? There has to be a discount, there has to be something, so there is some accountability on that end, because you don't want to waste money calling patients and so forth to get these devices the dispensing rescheduled. We charge our patients when we dispense our orthotics. Why? Because we're not just dispensing that orthotic, we're evaluating the shoe that they go in, and more importantly, say for plantar fasciitis, I'm evaluating whether that patient, how they did with the night splint that I dispensed, how they did with the compression sleeve. If I gave them an injection, how are they doing with that? So, rarely is there a situation where we dispense an orthotic, almost never over the counter where the staff dispense. So unless somebody's had a couple pair from me or 3-4 pair and I feel comfortable, we won't dispense them over the counter. They'll see us to have those devices dispensed, and there will be an office visit, and I get very little pullback from that. This is information from about 3 years ago. I would say since I put this information together, our prices have gone up maybe $50, but I'm just going to throw out some food for thought here. If you're not a big believer in the successful use of an orthotic, or you're kind of like, yeah, it might work there, but it's not going to work where I am, I can't stress enough that you're really shorting yourself. And let me give you some numbers here. And I'm going to read it right off my sheet, because every time I read it, it just blows me away. I believe that there should be $400 worth of profitability in a pair of orthotics. Okay, if you're paying $87 for your pair of orthotics, your price should be about $487 or a little bit more. Okay, if you simply cast for one extra orthotic a week, that'll just one extra orthotic week, that'll add $20,000 clear profit. And that's, again, above what you've paid for those extra orthotics a year to your bottom line. If you cast an extra orthotic each day, that equates to $80,000 clear profit to your bottom line for that year. So just think in those terms alone. Don't get caught up in the biomechanics, or I can or can't do this. I would say narrow this conversation down to the fact that next week, I'm going to try to cast for simply just one extra pair of orthotics for that week, okay? And then generally try to see if you can't expand that to a couple extra a week, and then one extra a day, and look what that can do. It's low tech. None of these people are calling you in the middle of the night because their bandage got wet. This is the easiest thing that you can do to increase the revenue for your practice. And quite honestly, as I found out, more importantly than revenue, you're going to prescribe orthotics to patients that maybe you wouldn't be willing to in the past, and you'll find out just how successful they are for that problem. And what I found out is I was underprescribing to such a great degree, but as these people were getting better, and as I stuck my neck out a little bit and tried orthotics for a few other conditions, I got all this positive reinforcement back. And now it's just part of my routine. I don't even think about it. And so anyway, Chris, you're welcome to list my phone number. I'm happy to talk to anybody at any point. If anybody wants to call me and has some questions about orthotics, I'm happy to talk with them. I enjoy this. This is the easiest part of my practice. If I could do orthotics all day, every day, and not have to worry about diabetic ulcers and osteomyelitis and things like that, I think at times I'd be much happier in practice. But to me, this provides just tremendous happiness to my practice life. I enjoy orthotics. They work, and they're profitable.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, Walt, so you mentioned something. One of my favorite patients is the patient that walks in 3 years or 5 years later and just says, I'm ready for my next pair of orthotics, right? One of the easiest things in the world, right? I mean, just, they're happy. There's not much of a conversation that needs to go on. And you just know it's the annuity, right? It's the annuity that's going to be coming for years and years to come. So that's number one. Number two is I want to ask you a question. So I know there's a lot of podiatrists who are veterans who don't do a lot of orthotics for whatever reasons. I think some of it comes down to money. They might not be covered by insurance. You handled that. You covered that. But there's also a lot of young associates who don't really get the training that we got, back years ago. And they don't do it because they don't have the confidence. How did you get your youngest podiatrist who's been with you now for 2.5 years? How did you get her up to speed with prescribing orthotics at the level that she does?
So Ashton Nelson probably outperforms. I've got three of some of the best people to work with. I couldn't be happier, and I had to kiss a lot of frogs to make that happen. I had a few people come through here that just didn't work out, and the three people that I have working with me now couldn't be better. But what we did with Ashton, or what I did with Ashton, is she simply followed me. When we hired her, part of the deal was you're going to follow me for. I think she followed me for almost 3 months, and that allowed her to begin practice in a tremendously good way. She hit the ground running. She had no questions about when do I have this wart patient come back after the first treatment, or how do I treat this condition with an orthotic, and so forth. So bringing Ashton up to speed was simply a matter of her following me and listening to, I didn't even know that I had a shtick or a spiel, okay? I had no idea that I had protocol. It's just something that evolved over time, but I'll listen to her now if I'm walking by a room that she's in, and I'll hear myself, because I do use a lot of the same things. For instance, I think I used the fact that when your orthodontist takes your braces off, the first thing he or she does is put you in a retainer. Things like, we're going to fix your bunions and hammer toes, ma'am, but the reality is we all know, we know that these aren't from your tight shoes. That, you told me that your mother had these and your grandmother had these. Let's make sure that this problem doesn't come back. Let's get you into an orthotic postoperatively. I can fix your bunion, but I can't fix the mechanics of your foot that caused this bunion to occur. And subsequently, you're going to hopefully live long enough to where this orthotic will help prevent this problem from returning.
Yep. A question I have here from someone is Craig Shapiro. Hey, Craig, out in New Jersey. Do you cast the patients after 3 years? Do you recast them, or does the lab keep the cast and just use the old cast?
So we'll cast somebody after a year. Our rule here is we're going to recast you after 1 year. Our lab, as part of our deal with them, is they will keep our molds for a period of 1 year. Now I understand they simply scan them and actually have them longer than a year, but we've stuck with our protocol where after, so you come in for a 1 year follow-up, because we send cards out. Now it's probably a text or an email, but I'll say cards. So when they come back in a year, we'll recast them. And in many cases, if that patient comes back and they don't have an HSA account and they don't have orthotic coverage, say for their insurance, and they paid cash for the first set, usually that orthotic is just fine. We're not going to replace it. But if they come back at a year and they have orthotic coverage, or they want to use some HSA dollars, we'll recast them and get another set. I'm a big proponent of having a second set of orthotics. So one of the reasons that we don't promote that second set of orthotics as heavily is when we did that, we tend to lose patients for 3 to 5 years because they've had 2 sets of devices. I'd much rather have them very happy with 1 set and then subsequently see them in a year and get them into another set, because in most cases they have an HSA or an insurance carrier that'll cover that for them.
Excellent. That's great. So one of the questions I have here is, how do you handle checking insurance benefits? I'll answer that really quickly. So what we do in our practice is we'll see the patient on the first appointment, and maybe you have a different protocol. We will check their insurance benefits after the first appointment, and we always schedule them back for a couple of weeks, because patients that need orthotics, typically like plantar fasciitis, tendonitis, all those things, they're coming back for a follow-up appointment. We do an insurance benefit check between the 2 appointments. So, Walt, how do you guys do it?
So that's a good question. I tend not to get caught up in the insurance question. Oftentimes what I'll say is this, is because it's so easy, you lose a lot of patients where either we're checking or they're checking with their insurance carrier, okay? So the question comes up, Mrs. So-and-so has come in, she's had heel spur syndrome for a year and a half. She's seen Dr. So-and-so, they didn't do orthotics, she's frustrated, and the concept of an orthotic will come up. And I'll always use that orthotic as, okay, we can do EPAT, we can do an amnio. They've been talked with, and they've been on the internet, they've looked all this stuff up. And I'll say, okay, put all that aside. Before we do anything, we're going to try an orthotic and see what that works. Let's start with the foundation, okay? You wouldn't buy new tires for your car without thinking about alignment, right? They'd wear out very quickly if you didn't do anything. So let's get this aligned. Let's try it. Let's try the night splint. Let's try the compression sleeve. Let's see how this works. Well, does my insurance cover it? I go, you know what? You can check on that. My staff can check on it. Let's go ahead and get you casted, okay? We've got your molds here and so forth. This is not going to get it better unless we do something like this. And you've been elsewhere and it hasn't worked, or you've had this for a year and a half. So I tend not to allow a patient to fall back on the out, okay? I'll cast them. If the worst scenario is I have to throw the molds away, who cares, okay? I'll even say this is, normally we charge $100 for a deposit, which we do. Why don't you go ahead and talk it over with your husband, call your insurance carrier tomorrow. We'll try to do the same. We'll see what they say. And you know what, if you call tomorrow, sometime tomorrow, you decide against this, we'll just throw the molds away and we will not hold your $100 deposit. And I can tell you 95% of the time, if they have to pay out of pocket, they're going to do that.
Yeah, that's great.
So to answer the question, I don't get involved with insurance. I tend to say, let's put that aside. I'm here to get you on the right track. Let's do this. And so I kind of, because otherwise that patient's going to lock onto the idea that they may not be covered, or I have to call my insurance carrier or whatnot. And that completely changes the momentum of that visit, where they've gone from wanting to get better to wanting to talk to somebody they don't know on the phone about insurance coverage. They miss the point. The point is, you need this. This is something that you're going to need to utilize to get better.
Yeah, you used the word earlier, prescribe, and that's exactly what you're doing. Is you're not selling anything, you're prescribing what they need. And there was a question here about what percentage of orthotics go to Medicare patients who are paying the $497. So Walt answered that. I know what your answer is going to be, but you don't treat patients any differently whether they're Medicare or non-Medicare.
And I used to, I used to look at every insurance card. I used to know back then there were only about six different insurance carriers, and actually it was really down to two. I knew that Medicare didn't cover orthotics, and I knew that two of the Blue Cross Blue Shields did, one didn't. I know preferred one did. I mean, I had to go through that in my mind. It's tiring, and then as insurance got worse, so I changed my approach. At this stage, I don't care if you're 90 or you're 9. If you need an orthotic, we're going to have that discussion and not talk about whether it's covered or not. We're going to help that patient any way we can. But we're going to treat the patient rather than treat the patient's insurance card. And if you can put that out of your mind, it's as powerful as in the back of your mind knowing that you don't feel so much like a salesperson if, in fact, in the back of your mind, you know that you'll give that patient's money back to them if what you're proposing to them doesn't work. And they don't necessarily know that, but it's very powerful to have a pissed off patient who can't make the orthotic work, sometimes through no fault of their own. They just can't make it work. Say, you know what, let's refund that, but let's move on to something else. Okay, we know that this doesn't work, because I think it's too easy to lose a patient based on the fact that something like that doesn't work. So move on and try something else. And that's how you save your patients, and for yourself save face. So you can go into the next room and speak confidently about an orthotic because you know you're going to do right for that patient.
And that's just it. You're prescribing something you know that benefits them. And I'll even use the term, there was a question here about, I think my patients are tight and I'm not good at prescribing orthotics. I haven't been really good at it. it's about giving value. And what I'll say to the patients sometimes is, let's put money aside, because we know nowadays in healthcare, money becomes more of a conversation. Let's just put that over here. I want to talk to you about what I believe is the best thing for you. This is what works the best, and this is what I'm recommending for you. Now, if you want to have the money conversation, I'll mention to them, what the out-of-pocket expense is. But if they know that there's value and you're coming from that perspective, it's pretty rare that they're going to say no. Do some patients say no? Of course, there's still going to be some patients that say no, but the vast, vast, vast majority of them. And Walt mentioned not prejudging, because you think your patients are tight, and I would tell you that a lot of that's in your mind. And I only know that because I thought that at one time, and yet it's really just something that we're prejudging. Most patients are willing to do it if they see the value and they know that you're coming from a real, authentic, ethical standpoint when you're doing that for them. Do you charge for casting? That was one of the questions here.
And that's changed over the years, Chris, because insurance carriers look at casting differently than they used to. And so what we've done is we've tried to have a core cost at $497 that includes the casting. Okay, that doesn't mean that we don't submit the casting fee along with the L3000 code, but it with different carriers it gets us to $497 in different ways, and I kind of turn that over to billing. But yeah, you're crazy if you're not charging a casting fee, because oftentimes that insurance carrier will base what they consider usual and customary based on both those numbers. Okay, so does that make sense? So yes, we do charge for casting, and we will charge for casting in a year, and we will not use your molds from a year ago. If it's more than 12 months, we're going to recast you and you're going to be recharged for that. If you want a new set of orthotics within that first year, if the bottom line is it's too hard to vet out some of these carriers. Most of the time it's $497 if you want another set within the year. If they ask about casting, am I charged more for casting or whatnot, we'll discount it maybe $40 or something like that. But most people don't ask.
Right, exactly. So there's a question here from Katie. Do you hold the cast until the patient calls you back after checking with their insurance before you send them into the lab? And the answer for my practice is yes, we will hold them, because we want to make sure that the patient understands. We call all the patients and we tell them either they're covered or they're not covered. This is what the fee is going to be, because otherwise, we're having lab costs that no one's going to pick up. So we just want to be clear about that. We will hold the casts.
Yeah, and we will hold them as well. Oftentimes, if somebody is on the fence, we also don't like to hold people responsible for a deposit. So a lot of times we'll just refund their deposit, but we try to get $100 deposit on each patient. But they don't know that, but we'll try to waive it. If they call and say, I talked with my husband, we can't do it. Even if we haven't had the discussion, what it does is it puts the onus on them to call back. And that's powerful. They know that their check is there and it's fully refundable as long as they follow through. And I think that's really important. Now, I'll also have a deal with patients where if we don't hear from you, say by noon, I said UPS comes about noon, 1 o'clock. If we don't hear from you by noon tomorrow, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and send that out. Okay. And what it does is it saves the office a call. Now, occasionally there's a mistake and we make an orthotic for somebody that didn't want it. Okay, what do we do? Well, I've got to deal with my insurance, with my orthotic lab, and that is they'll refund it. We can either send it back and get a refund that will just be applied to our next bill, or we can call them, and we'll get the okay from them to keep that device. They'll give us credit for it still, and we'll use that as one of our samples. So that's also something very negotiable, as is postage, where so I'll negotiate postage, I'll negotiate the ability to send an orthotic back. If somebody never comes in to pick up an orthotic, or they don't pay for it or whatnot, they'll give us credit for those. We'll either send them in, they'll destroy them, or they'll let them keep it. And then there was one other thing that I wanted to make clear. Anyway, go ahead.
While you're thinking about that, Valerie's asking, what is the most common orthotic you order from Marathon? She's looking at the list.
Sure. So I've got a prescription right here. I'll do shape, flange, and heel cup all as regular. I'll do my mid layer as sulcus and my top cover as sulcus. On the forefoot extension area, I'll circle poron at 1/16 inch. In this particular one, I like to use ultra suede on the top of the forefoot extension. It really makes them strong. I've got a first MPJ cutout on this one, and I like the co-poly. If you're looking at a marathon orthotic farm, I like the co-poly. The polypropylene is great for teenagers and so forth that can withstand. The polypropylene is pretty hard, but I'll do a co-poly, and then it gives me the option to circle firm or flex, and 9 times out of 10, there's not a big difference on the co-poly between the firm and the flex. I'll circle flex. What I like about marathon and what I was completely off base on is colors. I had no idea that people would enjoy picking their color. So we have a color wheel in every room, all 10 rooms, and patients get to pick their color. Here's why I think that's important is so often patients with Naugahyde would come in with one orthotic from 2013 and one from 2017, and they looked the same, but one was completely worn out and one was in pretty good shape, and the side that was completely wore out, they have the heel paint on. So now we have them get a different color each time, and we don't have any of those issues as we've had in the past. A couple little things too is remind patients that if the dog destroys an orthotic, and we see one of those every 8 weeks or so, that's covered under your homeowner's insurance, okay? If you've lost your orthotic based on the fact that your car was stolen, or there was an accident, or they were stolen or misplaced and has anything to do with your car, you can turn those into your automobile insurance company. We've done a ton of that. And again, people forget about that. So we mention it and they're like, you can just see the light go on. But we replace, 15 pair of orthotics a year due to dogs or other loss or whatnot, and you'd be surprised how many times we get reimbursed based on the fact that it's under a homeowner's policy.
Yeah. Carl is asking, are you seeing orthotic patients and palliative patients at this time? The answer for me is yes. Walt, I know the answer for you is yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
If ever coming into the office, we're just making sure that we're following the right protocols. What if the patient's insurance pays less than $497? Can you balance bill them? No. If it's a plan where you have a contract, you have to take whatever the insurance pays. We don't balance bill them for that.
Yeah, no, we don't either. It's tough. You like to get what you like to get reimbursed for what you're billing. But you know what? I think at the end of the year it all works out. I don't get caught up on that. Somebody just asked about palliative care. This Bergman cork and leather device. Let's see, cork and leather device right here, leather top and bottom. I see a lot of people with, again, here's my Medicare patient. They don't have diabetes, but they have no fat pad, prominent metatarsal heads. Build a Bergman cork and leather device with a deer skin or calf skin forefoot extension. It's magic. I mean, these people absolutely love them. And oftentimes it's not the 85-year-old lady who's buying them, but it's the daughter who says, Mom, we're here every 8 weeks for trimming that callus. Why don't you try that? What do you got to lose? And we charge, again, I have no problem charging $97 for palliative care. We do that all day. And if you're not charging it, you're attracting too many palliative care patients. That's just how I look at it. And it's really transformed the type of patient that we see. But, I tell people, if you save yourself 2 palliative care patient or 2 palliative care visits a year, you'll have your orthotics paid for in 1.5 years to 2 years, very easily. And not to mention the fact that your daughter has to drive from the Twin Cities to pick you up and bring you here and things like that. And we provide a lot of Bergman orthotics just based on that premise. But these conservative little old ladies and men who come in with the smile on their face, I'm still trimming their calluses, but rather than every 8 weeks, it might be every 12 weeks or longer. And that's really rewarding. And again, I just love the Bergman device because it's one of the few things left in this world that's handmade, and it really looks that way. It's not perfect by any means. In fact, sometimes I think I can tell which of the lab techs built one versus the other, but they're very unique, but they are a work of art. And I just always used them and found, and they're less than $90. So.
Yeah, those are great. I used to use those years ago. Actually, I forgot about that lab until you brought it up to me in Miami. And they're great. I mean, that cork and leather that leather device you just showed is just golden. I mean,
so I can wear any orthotic I want. But when I'm screwing around out at my lake place, I'm doing a lot of standing. A lot of my buildings are far apart. I have an old pair of they're probably 8 or 10-year-old Bergman devices. I just love those devices, and again, they're like an old saddle or an old baseball glove. They fit so well, and you can just imagine what these people's feet feel like when they're walking on those knuckles. And to put something underneath that, if you can get them to, if you can get them to do it, it's a big stretch sometimes. But oftentimes if a daughter or son is there, that's really helpful.
Yeah. Do you have a problem at all with the fit? Charles is asking about the Bergmans being kind of bigger and wider and that type of thing.
Yeah, you've got to be careful and check on that Bergman form. Make sure you're checking, the more regular cut. The great thing about most of the people that I use a Bergman orthotic for is they're beyond the vanity. They're wearing a shoe, SAS shoe or something that, if nothing else, they may have to get a half a size larger, but most of these people have a shoe that needs to be replaced anyway. So we have them hold off on that. Any of you who are thinking about having a shoe store in your office are welcome to call me. There are days that I'm really glad I have one. There are days that I wished I didn't. But at the end of the year, having a shoe store allows us also not only to make sure that the patient leaves with the appropriate orthotic, but also with the appropriate shoe. And it's nice to give them some options as well for different shoe gear. But I would say most of the orthotics that I dispense that are Bergman pretty much fit in that shoe right off the bat.
Right. And there's a question about Bergmans are not ordered through Marathon Labs. Bergman is ordered through the Bergman Company.
Yes. Yeah. John Bergman is still making orthotics by hand. I think they're Southern Illinois.
Yeah, they're in Northfield, Illinois, and it's got two N's on the end. So it's BERGMANN. So if you look that up online, Bergman Orthotic in Northfield, Illinois. And
when they send you the sheet, they have a traditional functional device. The sheet is two-sided. First sheet is for, I've never ever used a Bergman device that isn't cork and leather. So you have to turn it over. The brown side is the cork and leather. The blue ink is their polypropylene device on the other side. And just, oftentimes it can be a little confusing that way, but I tend to separate my functional lab from my accommodative lab. Just something we've always done.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. By the way, everybody's unmuted. If you like to either share something that you're doing in your practice that other people can benefit from, if you have a question, obviously people have been doing it in the chat and the Q&A. Really appreciate that. I knew this would be a hot topic. Orthotics can be, as Walt has talked about, an excellent service for your practice, great for your patients, great for revenue. And I love the whole concept of just one additional each week can equal $20,000 for the year. So that's awesome. I'll stay for a little while if people want to hang around. We'll answer questions for a little longer if you'd like. Otherwise, if you feel like you're ready to go and enjoy the weekend, please do. Thank you for joining us. I'll give it like 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm going to shut up for a second here and see if anybody wants to speak. So Barbara asked about the Good Feet store. We have a Good Feet store in Milwaukee. Do you guys have a Good Feet store in St. Cloud?
We put them out of business.
Oh, fantastic. Hey, somebody put them out of business. Yes, we do in Milwaukee, and they do a great business. I mean, they advertise all the time on the radio, and they're probably our biggest competition. But what the Good Feet store has taught me is that patients are willing to walk in the door and spend $1,000 on orthotics. So if we can't get them to spend $497, then we've got to work on our presentation a little bit more. And Walt's presentation is the presentation. You give them the value, and they'll believe you if you come from a place of being authentic and ethical and all those things. The money comes last. That's always the very last thing you're talking about. Selling and prescribing cash services isn't easy, but it can be a game changer for your business. So people are going to listen to the radio and they're going to, see the Good Feet stuff out there. That doesn't really matter to me. I can't control that. What I can control is what we're telling patients in the office, what kind of messages we're giving patients through our multiple marketing mediums. That's really all we can do. So the competition is going to be there. Don't think about it. Just focus on what you can focus on.
We found that the
business. I love that.
We found that the Good Foot store really educated our clientele about an orthotic, got them thinking. I mean, they spent thousands and thousands of dollars on advertising in our market and educated people on orthotics. So in some ways, I was unhappy to see them leave because those constant ads, and there was not, people would come in and say, well, what about the Good Foot store? Could I get a pair there? And I said, yeah, for about $1,000. And I said, no x-ray, no nothing. You got somebody who was working at McDonald's 6 months before that. I said, they do have somewhat of a training program for these people. But the reality is there's a reason they want you to put these on your visa. But you also sign that you can't get your money back. In other words, the biggest complaint that I had with the Good Foot store was probably not the fact that their devices didn't work very well, because they actually worked pretty well for what they were. The fact was they were very bad at mitigating conflict or mitigating any adjustments or anything like that. And when patients realized that they couldn't get their money back because they signed off on the ability for their visa to refund money if there was a complaint, that almost resulted in almost a prescription every time we got into that conversation, because we can provide a better device, a more prescriptive device. And I said, there is a reason that they have to call their devices arch supports, because they're not orthotics. They're not custom made. They're not a true prescription. Yeah,
that's great. Kim Gant out in Portland, nice tip from you. Thanks so much, Kim. So he sent a letter to the state association members suggesting not only to work on management and the protocols and the things we talked about, but work on your office. Maybe it's the carpet that needs to be cleaned. Maybe the walls need to be painted. And I love the whole concept of sitting in the chair out in the reception room as well as the treatment room and see what a patient sees and maybe make some adjustments to wall hangings and things like that. So thanks so much for that, Kim. That's a great tip. Brian O'Neill asked about, could you discuss the Remy laser quickly? So I use the Remy laser for pain, for warts, and now I'm going to start using it for toenails. So I love it because it's got the 3 different functions. It's a real small unit. It can be moved easily from room to room. It works very well for pain. It's what I've used it for most. The price tag on it is about $14,500 versus like the $60,000 units that are out there. It's got dual wavelength. If you go to remylaser.com, you'll see a lot. You'll see testimonials. These lasers are not all created equally, but the good ones on the market all work well. And again, it's a great service for your patients. It's a cash service for your patients. And boy, the ROI on the Remy laser is off the charts. I mean, our practice will do, I don't know, maybe in a year's time, maybe $30,000 in revenue. I always think like Walt in terms of like 2 patients every week at a price point of, $397, $497 for like 6 to 7 treatments is going to equal X number of dollars throughout the year. And I think about it in terms of a long game. So a long game. So if I'm spending $14,500 for a laser, what is the ROI on that over the course of 10 years? It's just astronomical. So I know Walt's a big fan of that as well. Let me answer a couple of other things. How do you use amnio with ESWT? So the way we've done that is we'll do an ESWT treatment the first time. by itself. The second time they come in, we'll do an ESW, we'll do the injection and an ESWT treatment. And then the third visit, it will be just the ESWT. There's not really any research done on any of that. There's not like perfect protocols. There's a friend of ours in Chicago who's done a ton of these, and I've adopted his protocol. He's had a tremendous amount of success with that. So, you know, I just feel that doing both of them is going to regenerate the plantar fascia more so than just doing one of them. I've had success with each one of them individually. I've had success with doing both of them together. I've done a lot more individual treatments with those two things than I have together treatments with those two things. Over-the-counter orthotics from Katie. So she does some over-the-counter arch supports. Well, that's an interesting question for you because I rarely have a conversation about OTC. What do you do?
Great question. And before I forget, one thing that I wanted to add, I finally remembered it, is in negotiating with your company, your orthotic company, try to negotiate, say, you know, a dozen pair of orthotics a year or 20 pair of orthotics a year that you don't pay for. Why? Your family members, your staff members, but this is what's been very powerful is a referring physician comes in, a referring physician's wife or vice versa comes in. I know that they haven't met their deductible. We're just going to take care of that. It doesn't cost me anything. I will write a little note to the lab manager and say, this is a freebie, and we'll get it. And that has been extremely powerful. And again, it's something that they can negotiate, where oftentimes they can't negotiate on their core cost of the device because of other deals that they have with, especially the federal government, where they could get audited. But having that as part of, so like we said, free shipping, we said, that type of, but if you can get, say, 10 sets a year or 20 sets a year that you don't pay for, that's ideal. Over-the-counter arch supports, we have them in our shoe store. The only time I'll use an over-the-counter arch support is without question. So for instance, somebody's going to be traveling and they need something, and you know that you can't mail an orthotic to them. We mail a lot of orthotics to Arizona when people see us in November and they're leaving next week, okay? So we do a lot of that. But what we'll try to do is that patient who is just unwilling to get an orthotic and you know they're not going to budge, we'll get them at least into an over-the-counter device. We don't strap or pad. I don't waste time strapping and padding. It doesn't pay. Occasionally you'll get something on it, not enough to do it. So my alternative to strapping and padding would be an over-the-counter arch support. But the moment you bring up an over-the-counter arch support, as far as getting that patient into a custom device, you're dead in the water, okay? Because it's a less expensive alternative. You don't even stand a chance oftentimes of getting that patient into a custom device if their insurance pays for it, okay? I think it's something that you should have available for that rare instance where under no circumstances is that patient, can they afford a device or an expensive device, or can they, or they're traveling and they need something today. Strapping and padding, somebody who's really point tender, I'll say, only after we've casted them and got them into the real thing and have them on the schedule, I say, you might want to talk with Michelle on the way out. She's got a nice over-the-counter device. Once we have your new devices, you can use this in your dress shoes or something down the road, but let's get your heel pain taken care of first with the real thing. So we'll use an over-the-counter device as a replacement or as an alternative to strapping and padding.
Yeah, that's great. By the way, I'm going to try to get to all of these, so thank you all for the questions. Do you use care credit? The answer is no. We used it a little bit. If people, it just didn't work. It's just not the right patient. Typically, they had major credit issues, and it wasn't very effective. I know dentists do that. I think for really big things like several $1,000 types of mouth treatments, it makes sense. But for the podiatry world, not so much. That's my opinion. What orthotic do you prescribe for? This is from Taga. What orthotic do you prescribe for pediatric patients that in-toe?
So we'll use an out-toe gate plate. Marathon Lab does a good job. I generally, I've never, of the companies that we've used, in-toe and out-toe gate plate work well. Kids can tolerate it. You and I would never tolerate one. But with the fat pad and so forth, in-toe or out-toe gate plate work very, very well. And
Yeah.
we still use them. I mean, I used to think they were a bit barbaric, but the kids never seem to complain. And I'm not sure that the orthotic is any more or less successful than having the parents do the stretching exercises and so forth.
Yeah.
But in any case, we do quite a few of those.
Yeah. Question about what brand of OTC. We use Power Step, and we use, I believe it's Pure Stride. Again, if I do 5 of those a year, it's a lot. I mean, I really focus on custom orthotics. It's just for the patient that, really can't afford it. We'll do that. I'm like Walt in the sense that if their insurance doesn't cover it, I always ask about an HSA. We actually have a part on our intake form that asks if they're going to use if they have or will use an HSA or FSA. That becomes more commonplace typically later in the year. But at the same time, people will use that. So what about OTC for you, Walt?
So, again, how many do we do? I bet we don't do 50 a year amongst 4 people, so, and I could be wrong. We use Power Step. It seems to be a good price point. They've got a nice stand. We sell more than 50 pair a year because we have a lot of people that'll pick them up as a second set. They'll pick them up for their husband. So I know a lot of them leave the rack, but I can honestly say that very few, if any of those, leave the rack and take away from a orthotic prescription. Okay, we don't use them as an alternative when we can. We'll use them as an adjunct.
Yeah, that's good. So Matthew was asking if insurance covers an orthotic, but the insurance pays poorly. What do you do about that? And I can tell you that years ago, we would just tell patients that, one of two things: either, we don't know if your insurance covers orthotics, we're just going to do $497 for orthotics, or we would be flat out, honest and tell them that what your insurance reimburses for orthotics, we believe, is way below standards, and our fee for orthotics is $497, and if you want them, it's going to have to be out of pocket. And most people, if you had a good relationship with them, they're not going to feel like you're gouging them, and why didn't you take what the insurance accepted, and that type of thing. So it's never really an easy conversation. If you're in a state where that's a problem, then unfortunately you're going to have those conversations, but that does happen. Let's see, Taga, what is your prefab or custom? Is the pediatric orthotic, that's a custom, right?
Custom, yes.
For marathon, anything coming from marathon is considered custom.
Yep.
So, all right. I like this one about sending letters to, so this is another tip, again, during this scary time, is sending letters to your PCPs that you are open, and especially for diabetic patients, to try to keep them out of the hospitals. So their wounds and things like that, I think that's great. So yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for that. That was Barbara. With the elective surgeries being canceled at the surgery centers, are you guys doing surgeries locally in your office during the next several weeks? I personally don't. I do like tenotomies, and pretty much that's it. In the office, I'll do a little zip, on an exostosis, but otherwise I'm not doing any procedures in the office. I don't believe you guys do either, Walt, do you?
No.
Okay. Yep. What CPT codes do you use for orthotics for insurance billing? So the L3000 code, right and left, is what we're using for that. I don't have the casting code in front of me.
I don't either.
I know there is a casting code, and you have to use the right and left for that as well. If you send me an email, chris@podiatrysuccesstoday.com, I can get that for you. Chris@podiatry, that's CHRIS at Podiatry Success.
See if I can quick grab it.
Okay, yeah, maybe you'll have that, Walt. That would be great. What else do we have here? Okay, Barbara, casting code.
Another 10 minutes or so. Grab me a router slip quick if you could.
Barbara's got a casting code. I don't believe we use that code. There might be
That
more.
doesn't look familiar. I'm going to have Reggie grab one for us real quick.
Okay. Yeah, because Barbara's code is 0398, which doesn't look familiar to me. Jeremy's got the code. Thanks, Jeremy. So
That sure looks like it.
A is in Apple, 4580, left and right. Yes, indeed. Now, California may have a different code. So the California code is S0395. But the code that Jeremy has, and Jeremy's out in the Connecticut area, A4580, left and right, that's what we use in Wisconsin. I believe that's what we'll use. So it might just be different based on state. And then Jeremy also gives a fiberglass, A4590, left and right. So is that the plaster of Paris, Jeremy? Is that what you're talking about? Code. Yeah, I think that's Barbara. Yes, the A codes are for the plaster only. Okay. Yeah. The S code, maybe is the S code for using a scan or something like that? Maybe that's the case.
Here we go. Sorry. As we stated before, Chris, so our billing will just automatically throw the casting charge on top of the L3000. So it is not part of our router. I do have a repair code here that I'll just throw out that we've had good luck with. And it's an L4210, L4210. And we don't repair a lot of orthotics, but our lab will fix any orthotic. Again, this is negotiable too, that has any damage or problem within a year. A lot of times it's just a few months, maybe 3 to 6 months. But it's surprisingly, we have been reimbursed. So we'll get the lab to fix any orthotic in the course of 1 year. And after that, if it's a device that somebody's unwilling to replace, we'll send it back and have it refurbished, and we'll use that L4210 code. And I'm shocked sometimes that it's reimbursed, but it is.
Yeah, and by the way, we've thrown some codes out here. This is certainly not a billing session. I don't want to get into that.
No.
I see a couple of different codes here. We've got the A code. We use the A4580, left and right, for casting. Looks like out in California, they use an S0395. But again, this is not a billing session, so I really don't want to get into that. The L3000 for us is very solid when it comes to the orthotics itself, themselves. So let's give it like, it's 4:46 Central, 5:46 Eastern. That would be like 1:46 on the West Coast. No, that's 2:46 on the West Coast. Anyhow, let's give it like 2 more minutes. We'll go until 50 past the hour, or 10 minutes to the hour. Couple more questions, anything anybody wants to share. We really appreciate this. Has been great, lively, appreciate it. Thanks, David. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate that. Hope you're well. Also, Craig, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Very insightful. Well, a lot of great information. I mean, you said so many good things. Confidence, use that word. I mean, that's really what it's all about when you're trying to prescribe orthotics with patients. If you don't have confidence, they're not going to have confidence in you. Don't prejudge. Put an expiration date down the bottom. That's just absolutely golden. Every time I hear that one, I smile.
And your phone number.
And your phone number. There you go. Yes. Thank you all for the well wishes. Same to all of you. We appreciate it. Hope this was helpful to you. All right. Looks like we don't have any other questions here. Let's see. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Again, thank you all for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, physical and mental health. Take care of your teams. Be a great leader. Put your vision together. Look to the future. Create what you want out of this. Walt, thank you so much. Excellent.
Thank you.
I knew this would be popular. Really, really great information. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you all. Everybody have a great weekend. Take care. Thanks, Walt.
Thank you. I'm all set, guys.